What's your story of the dumbest coworker you've ever had the privilege of working with? Worked at a retail store. One gentleman who had been working there for a few years was working the register. We sold big appliances. A couple comes in to buy a washer and dryer with cash. $100 bills. My coworker marks every bill with one of those counterfeit pens. If the bills are fake, it will be a dark color, and if they are real, they will be yellowish. Well, everyone turned black and he called the police. Police came. Turns out my coworker used a permanent marker and not the counterfeit pen to check each $100 bills. Story 2. She had no sense of diet, and that's fair. Some people don't get that information. Sadly, she was then diagnosed with type 2 diabetes and decided to make major changes. First, she was going to eat more fruit and less candy. So she came into work and saw that I was tired and said, "Mukul, you look tired. That's low blood sugar." It was 4:30 a.m. "Here, have some fruit." She opens her purse, which is completely filled with Laffy Taffy banana flavor. She also switched to only drinking orange soda all day. Again, the fruit. She was constantly having blood sugar issues and wouldn't listen to any of us idiots about how she's just piling sugar into herself. It was fruit, you dummies. Story 3. I was working at a Thai restaurant as a frontman. Most people there were from Southeast Asia and they needed someone who spoke fluent English. One day, one of the managers asked me, in busted up English, to help cut chicken. Not too much instruction. So I followed the other sous chef's example. As I was about to learn, that was too thick. Chicken lady came back in, saw me, and lost it. Started screaming, holding up fistfuls of raw chicken. "You cut the chickie too thick!" And even threw some pieces on the floor. I could see customers coming to the front, and I told her I have to take their orders. But she blocked the exit and kept ranting. Next, she paced around the kitchen, grumbling and pulling at her hair with her raw chicken-covered hands, ignoring the line of customers. Eventually, she sent the sous chef, who didn't speak English, to the front and told me to stir a big pot of soup for the rest of the day. As I was stirring the soup, she went back to pacing while caroning and moaning. She looked at the chicken on the cutting board, then at me and said, "We can't let the boss see this." She then picked up some slices of chicken, tossed them onto the drain in the middle of the floor, and started waffle stomping them through the grate. I told her to stop it and grow up, and she shot back with "back to pot" and continued to stomp the chicken down the drain. After she had stomped a good handful or two of chicken down the drain, it clogged and liquid started pooling around the grate. So what did she do? She waddled over to the kitchen sink and started mashing pieces of chicken down the sink drain. For the rest of the day, she kept coming up to me and holding pieces of chicken inches away from my face and shouting some gibberish about how thick they were. Eventually, she pulled out more chicken and started hacking away at it with a cleaver. She kept saying, "If our boss was here, he'd say, 'You're fired,' is what he would say." Eventually, the soup I was stirring started to burn. I tried a few times to turn it off and start the dishes, but when I turned off the burner, the soup was on. Chicken lady came charging back in, screeching, "Back to pot, back to pot." When our boss came back, we were running low on chicken. The soup was ruined, and none of the dishes were done. Oh, and remember the sous chef who didn't speak English? She was having a terrible day trying to communicate with a mass of frustrated customers. The manager tried to cover her ass, but our boss went through the security footage and saw the whole thing. He told the sous chef and I we could leave early, and we heard them shouting in some language I couldn't understand as we left. Apparently, when you jam raw chicken into drain pipes, it starts to smell, and the health inspector paid us a visit the next day. Then Chicken Lady got fired. She definitely seemed to have some issues, and I hope she gets the help she needs. Story 4. Okay, buckle up. This is a fun one. I work as a cook in a restaurant. Most of the cooks here are kind of crap, but this guy, let's call him Wayne, because I don't care if he sees this, takes the cake, because he certainly can't cook one. I've known he was pretty stupid since he started here, but working with him is just painful. He calls himself a chef, says he went to culinary school, and yet he's always asking how to do everything. The thing is, he doesn't want to learn. He wants someone else to do it until he sees that you want to do everything on your own. Then he tries to do stuff, but messes everything up. So let's run through some of his atrocities. Burgers. People are picky about their temps. There's the classic feel test, which is usually fairly accurate, but not always. Well, I was making one and he was just standing there. The ticket called for a medium, and it was just above a rare. It had a sear, but was completely raw inside. I set up the bun while I wait, and he goes to grab the cheese. I stop him and say it's still a medium rare. He says, "No, it's not man show me where it's medium rare at." He proceeds to feel it, and I can tell just by how much give there is that it's not ready. I tell him that, but he insists and puts the cheese on it. Now, because I love cooking, but hate it when people or myself duck up my food, I stop him. I pull the cheese off, use the corner of the spatula to dive into the middle, and reveal all that deliciously pink burger. I say, "Wayne, that's not cooked enough. Mid-burgers have a lot less pink than this." He gets pissed off, takes the patty without melting the cheese, and goes and gives it to the server. I stand there baffled and just wait for it to come back for being underdone. And it did, so I redid it while he was gone. I'm no burger expert, but I've never had anyone send my food back. I get rave reviews, especially for my burgers. Now the catfish. A server specifically asked that I make her sandwich, so I get to work. A few minutes after dropping the fish into the fryer, I check on it and decide it needs about a minute or two more. So I work on prepping sautéed peppers. I had everything else set up, so when he comes into the kitchen, I immediately see trouble. He lifts the basket and takes out the fish. I tell him that it's not quite done yet, and he yells, "Yes, it is. Here, look," and rips the ducking fishy in half. I'm so irritated at this point that I take my anger out on a bell pepper and pray for the best. The server never said anything as it was almost done, but not up to my standards. This right here, though, this had me mad. I have literally never been more angry at a person in my life. This was the same day as the poor fish, so I'm already pissed and ready for Wayne to leave. On top of trying to make sure the food we get out is good, I've got to prep just about everything as no one else did anything. It was time for the beef. Wayne and another cook chuck a whole chuck of beef onto our flat top because it cooks faster. Unfortunately, this rids all flavor. Salt? And results in more burnt chunks than even grounds. Today, I had been able to get to the beef before Wayne did. I throw a wild 5-pound stick in a pan, put lots of delicious seasoning, and set it on the stove to simmer while I attend to other matters. I had to use the bathroom, so I left the kitchen with Chef and come back to one of the most unsightly things I've ever witnessed. I see it before I open the door to the kitchen, through that nasty window, because who washes their hands in a kitchen? No one but me and the guy who trained me, that's who. I see Chef Wayne at the flat top, a ghastly sight on a good day, made worse when I realized what he was scooting around with a spatula. My beef, freshly dumped from the skillet, grease and all, onto the uncleaned hot flat top. As I walk in, he walks into the walk-in. I rush to my previous grounds only to see the once beautiful, slowly cooking, flavorful meat brown and black, huge chunks mixed with tiny bits, completely ruined. Maybe there's some hope. I pray as I taste a piece. Almost all the flavor is gone, charred from the grill. I pick up the spatula, not sure what exactly to do, give up and throw it onto the counter beside me. I walk straight to the bar and tell the bartender, our manager, that he can go. It's no secret this guy sucks, so he asks if I can handle it, then goes to cut Wayne. Chef refuses to leave until the next cook gets there, so I'm stuck with him. I busy myself with other prep work and see him pull my ruined beef straight from the greasy grill into a Ziploc bag. Of course, the bag begins to melt, holes form, and grease pools around the bag as tears pool on the cutting board in front of me. After all the deadened chunks are gone, I go to clean the grill. We have a scar to get any stuck-on food off, and I begin to chip away at my ruined masterpiece. To make matters worse, as I'm doing so, all that grease he dumped from the skillet pops up onto my hand, resulting in several blisters. I was so mad I didn't even feel the pain. Probably not a good thing, as all I did was wipe the grease off my and continue. Tell Dara Chef doesn't know how to cook. Story 5. We had an invoice that needed to be paid within 120 days, dated a few months back. She pulled up a calendar and started counting days one by one. She looked at me and said, "Are we really about to count to 120? I took the calendar and added up the days in each month, plus the day of the month it currently was. She looked at me wide-eyed and very genuinely said, "Wow, you're really smart." Story 6. I worked with this woman who was just gah. We got this new software and workflow, which I mostly trained myself on because only one person knew how it worked. In turn, I was tasked with training the rest of my department on it. I had a training session and this woman attended. She didn't get it. So I had another training session for people who couldn't make the first one, and she attended again. Still didn't get it. I sat with her at least 3 times to train again, using different training techniques each time in hopes that we'd find something helpful for her to learn this material. She thinks maybe she gets it. The time comes when I'm about to go on vacation for a week and a half, and in order to keep the project on track, this woman has to use this new workflow, which is 6 months old at this point. Has to. She insists that she's got it and doesn't need any other help. I didn't trust that she was telling the truth, so I spent a ton of time documenting the ever-loving crap out of this process. Annotated screenshots, very clear, very basic instructions, broken down to a level that would make anyone else crazy in their specificity. I spent an hour going over this document with her before I left, and she swears she gets it, and if she forgets, these instructions are perfect and clear. Okay then, I go on vacation. When I get back, nothing has been done. Nothing. She didn't know how to use the software, because I never trained her properly. I pulled up the documentation and asked her if she could pinpoint where she got stuck so that I could revise the instructions to be clearer and talk her through the process from that point. Oh, she didn't look at the documentation. She didn't even try to do anything because she didn't know how to do it. Why didn't she look at the documentation? She doesn't read. I clarify, you can't read? Oh no, she can read. she chooses not to. She did nothing for a week and a half because she just doesn't read. I got written up for making her feel bad when I said, "What do you mean you choose not to read? How is that even a thing?" Story 7. Summer job during college, working assembly line. My job was to put 2 screws into each item that came down the line. Everyone else had a similarly mind-numbing task. We'd all have been replaced by robots by now. About once a week, someone would bring in a rubber snake or spider and put it into a part coming down the line. When the part made it to Janet, Janet would scream. She would pick out the spider with her fingernails and put it on the line next to the part. Then the line would move and the spider would come to me. I would wait until she wasn't looking and throw the spider back up the line to a guy that would put the rubber spider into a part and send it down the line. Janet would scream every time for an 8-hour shift. Story 8. I managed a Blockbuster video once. Had one employee who didn't have a driver's license borrow another employee's car to go get lunch, and on the way back drove the car through the front of the store. Hurts me to call them stupid because I like both of those kids as people, but I'm not sure what else to call it. Had another employee one night ask what we do with all the extra cash. She saw that we dealt the cash drawers out at the beginning of the shift with $100 in it, and by the end of the shift there was a lot more in there. So I get the question, so I stupidly, jokingly said, "Oh, that, we just throw it in the trash at the end of the night." Later, caught her dumping cash from her drawer into the trash can. Had 2 other employees. One was a nurse over at the hospital and worked at Blockbuster part-time, not sure why, and apparently worked with the mother of another employee, whom she didn't get along with. One shift where it was me and the 2 of them working together, I had to have a phone call with the district manager, was gone about 30 minutes. Came back out and found only one of them still there, the nurse. I asked what happened and she said, "I don't know, he just left." So I called him, asked what was going on, and apparently she had spent the entire 30 minutes talking crap about his mom to him, so he quit. Had another kid who would regularly show up hours late or miss shifts entirely without calling out so he could play World of Warcraft. I've since left the retail space. I work in it now. I was working on a help desk once, and since I was a relatively seasoned vet by this point, I was helping train the new guys. Had one dude who was placed with us by a temp agency. He was very green, which is fine. We can give him tier 1 level work until he gets his feet wet. So I let him shadow me for a few days. Then I sat him at the desk next to me and said, "Okay, I'm gonna start kicking tickets your way. Do what you can. If you're uncomfortable, stop and ask me. I'll help you through it." He was like, "Okay." Dude worked basically autonomously for 2 solid weeks. Every 60 to 90 minutes, I'd be sure and lean over and ask how he was doing, and he'd either nod or give me a thumbs up. I was checking his tickets, and he was noting that he was doing the work. Like, the ticket would be for a locked account, and he would notate unlocked ACO notified user, which was fine. Well, after 2 weeks of him doing well, I told him to look at the general ticket queue and start grabbing stuff on his own that he felt like he could do, with the same instruction of, if you get stuck, stop and ask. Well, he got stuck on one. I don't remember the problem, but the solution would have required him logging onto a domain controller, same as with a locked account, which he had done hundreds of times by now. He leans over and goes, "Hey man, do we have some kind of documentation that lets us get onto domain controllers? Record scratch? How the duck have you been unlocking domain accounts so far?" Turns out, he was just noting tickets for whatever the duck and closing them. Had a lot of chargebacks that month. Had another newbie get caught stealing from the vending machines, fired. We had a client visit the office once. I will admit she was very attractive, and for a bunch of dudes who are locked in a windowless room all day with nothing to look at but other male IT staff, she was a welcome sight. Of course, most of us maintained our professionalism. One of our on-site guys and one of our help desk guys were chatting over email. The on-site guy said something like, "You won't believe the women in this office," to which the help desk guy replied, "Oh yeah, guess who came by today?" So, help desk guy went and tried to find a pic of this woman online, found her Facebook page and copied her profile pic and pasted it into the email. And in doing so, somehow also CC'd her on that email. On-site guy saw what happened, replied, all back with, "Dude, what the duck?" And then went into our hosted exchange and locked her mailbox. Gave himself full access rights to it and then deleted the email. A little later, CEO gets a call from guess who. She says, "So, first of all, I got this really ducked up email from on my phone, followed by another email from, and now I can't get into my email at all." Both of them were gone not long after. Story 9. I have 2, same place. I just moved to a new state and got a warehousing job. After about 3 months of working on the floor, I got promoted to shift lead because everyone else was incompetent. That's where I met Dave and Mike. Dave was in his mid-60s, looked like George Carlin, complete with bald on top and mullet hair and a ponytail. Dave was a straight-up alcoholic. He came into work 3 times drunk and I had to send him home. He would complain of a really bad headache and go put his head down in the break room. But he was just hungover or drunk. On days he wasn't drunk, he would drink while on the job. He loved milk and would drink it every day. I smelled his milk one day that was kept in the break room, and it was about 75% vodka. I believe they're called White Russian. Dave was also a pathological liar. He would come to work, then ask to leave 4 hours in because he had an emergency. He also claimed to be drafted by the Yankees and the bass player for the Pretenders, both back in the 70s. He had 2 flip phone cell phones that would constantly beep with unheard voicemails strapped to his belt. However, the most annoying thing was he never did his job. If his job was to move product, he would do the trash. If he had to do cycle counts, he would move product. He would also count all the moves every night. Our main job was to take product from one warehouse and put it in the other one for picking. These were printed on pieces of paper. You grab a piece of paper, do the moves, sign off on it, and pick another one. He would spend 30 minutes counting these papers and seeing who did what. This was so unnecessary, I had to keep them at my desk. We worked third shift and would often have to wait around in the morning if HR wanted to go over company policy with us. Dave once left right after work, then came back an hour later, reeking of alcohol while he met with horror. I was told to keep an eye on him after that. This lasted for 6 months until he requested to go to first shift and was fired 2 weeks after he started, probably because he was drunk. Mike, on the other hand, was a pothead. He was in his early 30s and lived with his parents. I've got nothing against weed, but when it, or anything, takes over your life, you need help. Mike was, on average, 2 hours late to work every day. Yes, he would miss 1/4 of his shift. He would show up, eyes bloodshot red, and then drive heavy machinery. He would also take an hour break. We were allowed 30 minutes. Go to Wendy's, buy food, clock back in to only show 30 minutes, then go back to his car and smoke weed and eat his food. I distinctly remember him being 5 hours late on more than one occasion and him just clocking in and working. So why wasn't he fired? He was. He got fired about 4 months after I started, but just kept showing up. They never took him out of the system, so he worked for a week, and no one knew he had been canned by HR. Again, different shift. So after a week of working, they just let him stay as long as he showed up on time, which he didn't. After a few weeks back, he started showing up late again. He eventually was fired when he requested time off to go to Vegas. Oh, he was also a professional gambler too, and the company wouldn't give it to him. So instead of just calling in sick or whatever, he not only took the Vegas week off, but also the week before. He didn't show up for 2 weeks and was canned. He showed up to my desk after all this, and I quote, "Wouldn't it be funny if I just started working again?" While looking desperate. I said, "No, Mike, they fired you." So how are these 2 guys allowed to work? My boss, I was a shift lead, he was the warehouse supervisor, wouldn't fire anyone because he felt sorry for them. He had a really messed up life, where both of his adult sons were addicted to heroin, stole directly from him, and were in and out of jail. I think he came to work to escape his home life. He was also very ill with diabetes and refused to go to the doctor to get it looked at. Mike's firing had to come down from Harm, who was never there when we were, and Dave's had to come from the first shift supervisor. After 2 years of this, I basically had a nervous breakdown and quit. Story 10, a call center job. New employees coming in all the time because the old ones quit so fast. It was a legitimately awful job. He finished a week-long training program with the rest of his incoming class. The GM came in to congratulate them all, give a short speech, etc. Our guy announced to the entire class and the man running the company that he hadn't had lunch yet, then pulled out a burger and started munching on it. His first day of actual work, he left for 2 hours in the middle of the day to open a bank account without telling anyone. These were just the things I heard about. There were more. At the end of his 60-day trial period, he was informed that his services wouldn't be needed and he was free to pursue other employment opportunities. He got down on his knees, crying, and begged for another chance. The HR lady was so embarrassed, she gave him one. The next day, he got into a screaming argument with a customer over the definition of a word and had to be dragged away from his desk by security because he wouldn't go willingly, and he was audible to other customers calling for help. Story 11. I have no how she even got into the program. We worked in anesthesia. Our supervisor told her she had to get rid of her acrylic nails. For obvious medical reasons, she was told before she started she couldn't have them. To take them off, she put nail polish remover in the only cup she could find, which was styrofoam, and put it in the microwave because the heat would make the polish melt faster. Microwave was ruined, and she burned all the tips of her fingers. She should not be in a medical field. She also turned to me after completing the basic CPR class and said, "Do you feel confident saving someone?" "I don't. How many breaths do we do again? Plus, I don't want to put my mouth of someone else's. I don't know. They give us one-way valves to carry with us for that purpose." She thought it was a duck call. Story 12, so we're short-handed. My good coworker friend, GCF, and boss's second hand gets the resume of GCF friend's girlfriend, who we'll call KH for knucklehead, which admittedly is too kind. Hai has done a lot of restaurants and the like, and needs a slightly more consistently hour job as she also has just had a baby. Boss interviews her and hires her as KH is sweet and charming. So we put KH on the phones and directing calls because she's not yet licensed and can't legally handle most of the information we had. Getting your license requires a week-long class and passing an exam for each type of license. These require some memorization of laws, and in context they are super easy, and extremely light math, like remembering that item B is always half the amount of item A for all 5 possibilities. These class exam sets are also maybe a few $1,000s per person. We are also paid for our time in class by boss. They are extremely easy. Cage's class comes up. Monday, Tuesday, we get a note. She didn't attend Wednesday, Thursday, she didn't attend Friday, and since she missed class, cannot be given the exam voucher required for the full exam. Why? She couldn't get a sitter. So boss sets up on the online version that she can do from home. Again, this goes by and she doesn't take the class. We don't know we're paying for her to chill at home until Thursday. Why? She doesn't have the copies of the books that she received on Monday of the live class to boot. A few phone calls and the company sends another copy to her house. Online class comes up again and KH is saying she didn't receive the books again. Boss calls up the company, begs them to move her to the next class and send us the book copies to the office and has her borrow mine, which are full of notes. KH plans on taking the rest of the week off, paid, but boss has her come in to take care of the phone since she's not in class. At some point, the class company's liaison calls us to check if we got the books, which they didn't have to do. KH answers and tells liaison no. KH gets off the phone and starts ranting, regardless of clients in our office, that the liaison with the class company must be man. Only a black person would go through the effort to screw her over. Thing is, a box had arrived 3 days before, and KH threw it under her desk without checking it. The next week, we now have 2 copies of the course books that have been mailed, and KH is booked for another online class. She, at this point, has been to some of the in-person class. We've been coaching her in the meantime. She has my notated copies and notes and goes to the online class. She then waits 2 weeks to take the exam and, unsurprisingly, fails. We secure a retake voucher, and KH starts calling out of work 1 to 3 days a week. When she's there, she ignores customers, mocks accents over the phone, and is rude to our bigger business clients, e.g. wealthy or commercial. So I'm pretty sure she's manipulative, lazy, but it's up to my boss to remove her. And my boss hates letting people go, even for legit reason. Then one of my own policies comes through our office. She looks at the names on the policy and demands to know why I've said I'm married, because I am. She insists I'm not. I inform her that my husband and I got our paperwork, we've done the courthouse thing, we file taxes together, we're married, and KH points at the policy. 2 different, very different ethnic last names. So what? For our own reasons, we never changed our names. KH says we have to have the same last name to be married. It's illegal for a woman to keep her name, and that, by claiming I'm married on my policies and other things, I'm committing fraud. I take my policy that she wasn't supposed to have in her hands because unlicensed, and hand it over to GCF, who looks like she's dying inside because we hadn't realized what level of dumb we were dealing with. KH failed the retake and was fired for not being able to pass the exam in 6 months and missing over 3 weeks of work in her last 30 days. Story 13. One of my old coworkers was using a nail and attempting to kill a wasp with the nail gun. The wasp landed on his hand. Take a wild guess where he shot the nail gun. Story 14. I used to work with a guy that was told to drain the used fry oil. Instead of using the metal tool to pull the drain, he simply reached into the fryer up to his elbow. He burned himself horrifically and was off of work for the remainder of time that I worked there. Story 15. Crash test Kevin. The guy was amazingly accident prone. I worked with him over the course of nearly 2 years, and it was simply amazing to watch. We were environmental field techs, performing field testing work on landfills. He dropped his car keys into a groundwater monitoring well. I don't even know how you do that, but he managed to do it. There's no way to recover your car keys from a 400-foot deep groundwater monitoring well. And to this day, I do not know if the keys would cause the water to come back hot, meaning a failed sample. He would forget when he placed his soil or water samples on top of his truck and would drive off, destroying the samples, meaning he would have to work late to collect them all over again. This was a regular occurrence. I seriously could type up dozens of examples of his stupidity, but I think you get the idea. Story 16. I work at a bar in a small town where we make Moroccan coffees by lighting 151 rum on fire after pouring it into a chalice and sprinkling nutmeg and cinnamon in. My coworker is a bubbly and adorable sweetheart, but she's kind of an alcoholic train wreck. She was making one, and after she lit the rum on fire, decided she needed more rum in the glass. So she just started pouring 151 into the glass, on top of the flame. Fire shot up the stream of liquid from the glass to the bottle, which popped the pour spout off and lit the whole bar and a regular customer's jacket on fire as flaming 151 spilled over the back of the bar counter. The customer started slapping his arm trying to put it out, but it wasn't working because he didn't stop, drop, and roll. So he ran outside and threw it on the asphalt and started stomping in it. We stood there, too shocked to do anything for a good 5 Mississippi before anyone even reacted. It just happened so fast, it didn't seem real. There were no water pitchers anywhere, and we didn't want to just pour water all over the bar because that's where the computer and all of the electrical wiring is, so we grabbed a wet bar rag from the sanitizer bucket and poured it over the fire and put it out. The best part is, the girl who lit the customer on fire is the daughter of the fire marshal of the small town where our bar is. She still got to keep her job. She also got a DUI leaving our bar a few months later, and yes, she still works there to this day. Story 17. Had someone new start who had some experience. I spent literally months repeating myself about the most basic crap and finally had enough. So told her if she has trouble remembering, she should write things down. You know, like normal people would. She then proceeded to call me a Karen in Pig Latin to her friend over the phone in earshot of me. I stepped out to call my SOMO half laughing because this 44-year-old grown-ass woman used Pig Latin thinking I, a 25-year-old at the time, wouldn't understand what she was saying. Did I mention her job was piss easy? She took less than a quarter of my workload. I could do her job in an hour. Main reason she was hired was so that whenever I was on leave, vacation, there was someone there to do my work without it being stressful and vice versa. She lasted in the job 9 months. 9 months, too ducking long. Story 18, Russell. It is definitely Russell. I used to run a machine in a plant that made carpet for Toyota and Honda. Russell and I used to get off work and get stoned. One day, the boss comes in and says we are having a random substances test the following day. I say, okay, no big deal, even though it was. Russell, on the other hand, yells, "Oh, crap!" at the top of his lungs from behind the creel. Poor Russell got a substances test the next day. Story 19. Oh man, this freaking girl I worked with was so dumb. We worked at Disney working on a ride, and whenever our fire alarm would go off, which happened a lot, like way too much, we had to evacuate everyone from the building and cycle out the ride vehicles that were still out on the track with guests on them, aka have them automatically come back to the station so we could unload the guests. We're supposed to stay calm and tell people that we're having technical difficulties. Very rarely does Disney evac the whole building for technical difficulties, BTW. If the whole building clears out, including the queue line, there's a bigger problem, FYI. This Karen did not do any of that. So she was at main console, aka was in charge of the ride, when the fire alarm starts blinking. She freaks out. She slams down on the e-stop, which shuts off all power to the ride and turns the damn lights on. Guests are like, WTF? No one on dock knows what just happened. BC didn't call anyone to say we had a signal 25 fire. So none of us know WTF is going on, but lights are on and e-stop is pressed. So we got to get these people out of the building and off the ride. But then we find out that what actually happened was a fire and she shut off all power to the ride, which means that the ride has stopped and the guests on it are potentially burning to death out on the ride with the fire. And we have to go on to the track and the possible fire and go get them. We were so pissed, and the whole time, this Karen is panicking and freaking guests out. A coordinator comes up and asks WTF is going on, and we explain, and I swear he was gonna wring her neck. Thankfully, the fire wasn't anything serious, and we were able to get the guests off all right. But damn, everyone was pissed. Story 20. I had a coworker who took credit for what I did. I work at my old high school as a janitor, and sometimes I would stay after to blow the bleachers out after I was done with my route, just for extra money. Well, it got to the point where I was doing it every ducking game. Sometimes I would have to rush through my route just to get her stuff done, and I was starting to get pissed off about it. So I started asking the supervisor at the time, why isn't she working on her route? She was the one who wanted the high school. She should be the one who's supposed to be doing her job. His reply, oh, I'll talk to her about it. Never did. A few weeks later, we have a meeting, and she lies in front of everyone in the office, including the boss and the supervisor, who knew she was lying through her ducking teeth. She was like, I'm the only one who helps out around here. I'm the only one who cares about my job. I'm the only one who asks the supervisor if he needs help. I was so pissed off about it because the supervisor knew she was ducking lying and didn't say a damn thing. Then me and her had to have a meeting, and she blamed it on the fact that she had kids and a disease. And it was like, everyone here has kids except for me, and I have a disease too, and I'm doing your work and my work. She ended up quitting a few weeks later because she didn't get the supervisor's job after he quit. After that, I decided, duck it, I'm only doing my work and my work only, and then I'm going home. I stopped staying after. I stopped helping other coworkers. I don't talk to new people unless they have been there for a while. I stopped caring about my job, and I'm basically only going now because it's a paycheck and it's 15 minutes away from where I live. Story 21. This is my favorite story about working it and how some people just really don't understand computers. The company I was interning at did manufacturing on site, so we had pickers in the warehouse that would put together pieces to fulfill orders. Basically, someone would order 30 widgets. The pickers would go through a series of bins to get the pieces to fill the orders and print out a shipping label from the computer system. Essentially, in order to be a picker, your computer knowledge needed to entail starting a program, logging into that program, clicking on an order in the program, then clicking print. Because of the very low skill requirement, most of the pickers were older people or people without much education. So I got pretty frequent calls out to the warehouse to help guide them through very basic stuff. I didn't really mind. I was an intern, and most of what I had to do was pretty easy, so I always had free time. One day I get a call from one of our pickers. She tells me all my windows are gone, and there's these lines on the screen. I said, that's strange. I'll come down and check it out. On my way down to the warehouse, I'm thinking, okay, she either turned off the monitor or unplugged it, or Explorer crashed or something. When I get down there, I look at the screen and see that sure enough, all the windows are gone, and there are indeed lines on the screen, but I also noticed that the desktop had a very slight glossy look to it, and instantly I knew what had happened, and that I had to keep myself from bursting out laughing. For those of you who didn't get there from my description, she had accidentally bumped or moved the mouse into the bottom right-hand corner of the screen, activating the Windows Arrow desktop peek feature, and just assumed crap was ducked up. Gotta call it. Didn't try moving the mouse or doing anything with the keyboard. Things were not as they should be, so she called without investigating further. One of my favorite parts of the job was seeing how different people interact with computers and how far certain users are willing to go with trying crap until they call. Some people are like this dear picker. Something isn't working right, and this isn't my area, I'm calling. Others, though, would call up with a laundry list of things they'd done, checking updates, reboots, reinstalling software, and basically called because they didn't have any more time to duck with whatever the issue was. Story 22. I knew a woman that would disinfect her keyboard every morning, like spray her computer with a cleaning solution and wipe it down like she was scrubbing a toilet. Not long after, she complained to it that several of her keys were no longer working. Story 23. The one that stuck a needle all the way into my arm. We were practicing starting IVs. Now you stick the needle in like 1/8 of an inch or so till it flashes, then drop it 10 degrees or some crap, then advance it another tiny pissy bit just to make sure the crap is in there, then slide the plastic crap into the vein. Easy breezy. Girl sticks the entire ducking needle into my elbow. Bless her heart. Hope she found another field to work in before she killed or let die a mother ducka. Story 24. Not me, but my dad used to repair fire engines and has apparently seen some crap. Colleague lent over a vehicle battery. Gold chain necklace touched a contact, and off to the hospital to have it removed from his neck where it burnt, and colleague was doing some repairs to the roof, fired a bolt gun, recoiled back. As the ladder was not tied off, it also started to go backwards when he grabbed the top. Very nasty. When he finally hit the floor, we all know apprentices get a hard time, and I'm sure many have been sent for blinker fluid, left-handed screwdrivers, etc. My dad knew of one that did not need this kind of help to make a fool of himself. Let's call him Kevin. Kevin was running up some stairs, in a warehouse with tread plate stairs, with a knife pointed at his stomach. End result, off to hospital. Kevin was bored, so decided to go racing around on an inspection trolley. While using his hands to propel himself up and down the workshop, he managed to run over his own wrist. Result, off to hospital to get his tendons reattached. Saving the best for last. My dad was gluing small pieces of rubber to a block of wood for some boring but important reason when Kevin came wandering past. My dad told him to come and help if he wasn't doing anything with one important addition. Put that cigarette out before you start. Indicates the pot of glue on the bench. This stuff is flammable. Kevin did not believe him and promptly pulled out a lighter and set the pot of glue aflame. Now panicking, he picked up the glue pot to take to the nearest fire extinguisher to put it out. Of course, burning glue slopped all over the floor. After my dad shouted at him to put it down and bring the extinguisher to the fire, he ran off to the furthest part of the workshop and brought back a water extinguisher. This turned out to be empty. He panicked and ran off for another one. Another colleague wandered over, having not seen the start of the incident, and tried to stamp the fire out. Now his boots are covered in burning glue. My dad grabbed one of those huge CO2 extinguishers that you can't switch off when it starts and put the various fires out. I'll see if I can get some more stories from my dad. Story 25. I used to be a librarian at a post-secondary institution here in the UK. Our principal did all sorts of dodgy things with money, but one thing that affected me directly was when he sent his 24-year-old son, Elle, to be our part-time volunteer. I use quotes because L told us he was being paid under the table because of course he was. In the 3 months L volunteered with us, he was meant to come 4 hours every day. He came maybe once a week at most. The first task he was given was to organize the DVDs in alphabetical order. You know, A to Z. After he said he was done, my boss checked. He had somehow put them in a completely random order understood by only him. When my boss asked WTF, he didn't understand how they weren't in alphabetical order. Once asked me what my politics were. I said I was very left-wing, and he said he was a social conservative, fiscal liberal. I guess he thought gay people should have job protections, but not marry or something. He was scared of the students and didn't want to interact with them. When he was asked to, he just said no and walked away. He would spend his days in the office playing computer games. After the disaster of the DVDs, he was assigned to me. One of my tasks was to do all the library displays. We did special events and monthly themes. The first theme coming up was Interfaith Day. I asked him to make a simple display explaining different religions with pictures and stuff. When he brought it to me, I read it over the Christianity page, okay? I noped it right out of there. I didn't bother reading the page on Islam. I just made the display myself. On what turned out to be his last day, I asked him to put up a pre-made display for LGBTQ month, February, here in the UK. It was a really awesome display, and we'd been using it for years. I handed it to him and went to post the overdue notices. When I came back, the display was still not up, and he was in my boss's office. Apparently, he realized what the display was and refused to put it up. I guess our reactions were enough because he never came back. I'm sure he was still paid for the rest of the year. Story 26. Worked as part of a 5-man team that did industrial cleaning of commercial retail properties. We were carrying a very heavy floor scrubber up a small flight of stairs to the lift. Dude had one end, I had the other. 2 other dudes had either side. Dude's phone rang and he took one hand off the machine and took his phone out to answer it, then dropped the machine on his foot. He answered the phone with, "Damn," dropped his phone, which smashed to pieces on the concrete floor. I nearly put my back out, trying not to drop this heavy but extremely expensive machine and break it. I set it down, looked at his foot. Blood was seeping out of his training shoe, and it looked dented at the top. I gave him some basic first aid. After about 10 minutes, the paramedics arrived. Quick, I know, right? And took him away to A&E. When he called me for repeat work, I was surprised. I asked him how his foot was. He spent 3 weeks in hospital. He nearly had to have 3 toes amputated. The blunt trauma. He was told to stay out of work and stay off his foot for 2 months. He was calling me 3 weeks after his operation. I told him I would not be hiring him again, and he had the temerity to ask me why. So I told him in a fairly dry and semi-professional manner, I won't be hiring you because your foot could give way at any moment, and you will injure yourself and could injure others. I had to hire someone else at short notice for the job you got injured on, which cost me a lot more as they had to come from an agency. You almost broke a 10,000-pound machine and me in the process. You answered your phone on the job, which is normally fine if you ask me first, but probably don't answer the phone when you're holding a 60-kilogram floor cleaning unit. I had to stay behind for an extra hour or so to clean up the blood you spilled on the floor. A long pause. He then retorts, I only answered it because I thought it might have been my parole officer, please. I'm sorry. I need the work. Goodbye. Please don't call me again. Story 27. So I've been diabetic since I was 14 months old. Basically, my introduction is as follows. Hello, I'm Amy. Nice to meet you. Just so you. No, I'm diabetic, so if you see me snacking on something or I ask, go to the bathroom, it's due to the diabetes. But don't worry. I'll tell you when there's a problem, and I won't let it get in the way of my work. So this one day, we were taking the kids out to the playground. I work St. a daycare, and I could feel my blood sugar going low. Like dizzying, world spinning, increased heart rate, slurred speech low. In other words, it was bad. Now the doors are all locked to prevent people from sneaking in and hurting the kids. So I basically stumbled to the teacher in charge and said, blood sugar's low, I need to get in. Her response, no, we can't let you in, we're out of ratio. Now, I understand the ratio rule. In this case, one adult can be in charge of 6 kids and we had 13, with 2 teachers and me. But this woman was a Karen to most all of the aides, and she was doing this on purpose because she, quote, thought I was faking diabetes to get out of work. I tried explaining this to her, but she wouldn't listen. She just said, sit on the bench if you're not feeling well. You can't go in. So I sat on the bench and maybe blacked out. I wasn't sure because the next thing I knew, a teacher from a different room was shaking me awake. Apparently, my head looked back and I was murmuring incoherently in this bench in front of 2-year-olds when she came out with her 3-year-olds. She and another woman half dragged, half walked me inside, and had to squirt juice down my throat before I had a clue what was going on. I got to go home early. But when I came back the next day, the same woman accused me of taking substances because I take my insulin doses through needles. And she found a needle in my purse, which she searched without my consent. She claimed the whole debacle yesterday had nothing to do with faked diabetes. She was just high. Out of law, I wasn't allowed to work until I got a substances test, proving I wasn't doing substances. So I got the subsentences test to prove a point, proved my innocence, and we both still work there today. Story 28. I used to work with this guy who was the world's biggest compulsive liar. It was insane, the stuff this guy said. We live in Alaska, and he claimed to be friends with a ton of celebrities. Not only that, but all completely different celebrities. He said he was friends with Kevin Hart, Kobe Bryant, Seth Rogen, Lil Jon, just a huge plethora of random people that I know he's never even met. He also claimed he had millions of dollars tied up in some bank account that a bunch of different people screwed him out of. So all of the money was just sitting there, but he couldn't access it. Then there were the stories he told daily about having threesomes every night, countless health problems he claimed to have, all these crazy, horrible things that happened to him because he just has such bad luck. The works. The craziest part of the whole thing was that he either A, believed all of these insane things he was saying, or B, thought that what he was saying was believable enough that other people would believe it. The whole thing was just wild. Story 29, former boss. If people really had cancer, why don't they just drink bleach? Bleach kills everything. Me. Well, yeah, but that's the beauty of medicine, is to kill the thing without killing the patient. I worked at a Cold Stone. My boss was fired a few weeks after I started for making 18 pans of yogurt that we only sold like 2 of a year. Edit, the yogurt stayed good for like 2 months after making it. Ergo, 78%, 14 pans of waste. Story 30. I'm on mobile, and it's not my story. I'll link the original later. Behold Slingshot Tim. Probably Slingshot Tim, a guy I used to work with who managed to slingshot himself into an office table during a meeting. Tim was the definition of an unnecessary hire. His dad was one of our most important suppliers at the time, so the boss was forced to hire him for a job he basically couldn't do, but also couldn't ever really be fired for. It was the get sweet spot. During one meeting with Tim, I saw him lean really far back in his chair during a meeting, far enough back that the chair started to creak loudly. Greater than so far so standard, but Tim had done this maneuver without turning the little thing under the chair to give himself a little slack. So he had to push really hard against the base of the table to stay in his casual position. It looked like a surprising amount of effort. Tim was visibly sweating to stay cool. Eventually, Tim couldn't take it anymore and ended up slipping about 2/3 of the way into the meeting. Thanks to physics, the lack of tension shot his chair forward, throwing him into the conference table. He took the entire desk to the chest, shaking the projector enough to unplug it from the wall and spilling more than a few cups of coffee. It was the most hilariously loud and stupid thing I've ever seen in a meeting. Even people walking by the conference room completely stopped to witness this grown man turn himself into a human catapult. He picked himself up off the floor in a daze, then started hurriedly packing up his stuff amidst uproarious laughter and ran out of the room. I'm not sure if Tim still works there, but I'm definitely sure the legend of Slingshot Tim endures to this day. Story 31. I was working on the oil rigs, and we were adding graphite to the mud system. Graphite is really nasty, tiny particulate, which had to be added very slowly. But this French-Canadian roughneck wasn't monitoring the mixing shack, and the bag vibrated of the counter, hit the floor, and literally coated every single exposed surface in graphite. As this microscopic particulate reached approximately the speed of light upon impact in every direction, having essentially no mass. So I go find a half-face respirator, disinfect it, load the proper cartridges to enter the space without breathing this crap in. So this French-Canadian git comes and tells me that I was using his respirator and to give it back. I couldn't believe it. I told him I was cleaning up his mess and threw the respirator at him and to go clean it up. So to be all tough, he puts the respirator in his pocket and grabs the power washer and walks into the shack full blast, literally saturating the air inside and just outside the door with this nasty graphite superfine graphite powder. Crap. I left the area and avoided the entire area like the plague. Then after like a half hour of inhaling this nastiness, I see him and he's got these seriously dark black graphite rings around each nostril as the gross fine. I could only assume horribly carcinogenic due to the fact it gets in your lungs, and you have no way expelling the graphite in any way, as it literally coats everything as you breathe it. Anyway, I grabbed that stupid duck afterwards and told him what a ducking retard he was, and that in the future when he gets lung cancer, he can trace it back to this moment in time for being a proud bullheaded. Story 32. She took 3 hours of an 8-hour shift just to restock the soda fridges. The first time you ever do it, it can take almost 2 hours, but by the time it's your 4th to 5th time doing it, it should take no longer than an hour. I usually clocked 45 minutes. None of us could figure out what was taking her so long. We even created cheat sheets for her, gave her tips, nothing. As it turned out, she was terrible at counting. She couldn't just eye a row of sodas and count how many there were, how many needed to be restocked. So she would take out each individual soda and count them by hand, and still get confused even then. Mind you, the rows were all only 7 sodas deep. Moreover, after counting out a row by hand, she couldn't think to herself, well, that row is 7 and this row is the same length, so it must also be 7. She'd take out all the bottles in the next row and count by hand as well, even if they were the same length. She didn't disclose that she had any sort of learning disability. In fact, she even had recently graduated college and had a degree. She was let go from the convenience store because her taking that much time in the back doing a soda left the other worker up at the counter for 3 hours without a break and without being able to do other chores. Busy store. She slammed our store, calling it a bullying work environment. I think she works at McDonald's now. Can't seem to get hired with her degree. Something that also used to annoy me is that she'd clean the coffee machine and then leave it on rinse cycle so people would go to get coffee and just get water. I had to follow behind her and correct her mistakes every time I worked with her. And she'd actually been there longer than me. And of course, she didn't take kindly to being corrected by someone younger. Story 33. Not my story, but my friend used to work at a famous toy store that went out of business years ago. She was a manager and was in the back doing some paperwork, and an employee nervously approached her saying he wasn't sure if he should take the money a costumer gave him. My friend asked what was wrong with the money, and he showed it to her. It was black and white and only was printed on one side. She came out to tell the guy he would not be getting the PlayStation he was trying to buy, and the guy just snatched it and ran. Story 34. This girl didn't appear to be super dumb, but she did a mind-bogglingly stupid thing that got her fired. We worked at a construction company where we generated and processed the purchase orders that would pay the subcontractors. If those documents went missing, our subs wouldn't get paid. Our subs not getting paid was a problem. We were a fair business and wanted to maintain both our good reputation and our bargaining leverage by paying on time and according to agreed-upon standards. For some amount of time, payment documents had been going missing. This was causing the manager of the department some embarrassment. A little bit of investigating led him to realize that the documents were making it back to the office and into his department, but then going missing somehow during the processing. He'd been talking to several of his employees about the situation, trying to determine what was going on. No one had any idea. Finally, he zeroed in on the 20-year-old bombshell working in the department. It was her actual job to process these documents for payment. She swore up and down that she was not doing anything wrong. The manager happened to glance at her trash can. The freaking documents were in her trash can. She was standing there, lying through her teeth while the papers were in her trash can. And before anyone says that she was framed, this was a 20-year-old gorgeous girl working in a department of mostly men. They were all quite happy to have her around as eye candy. We had never had any problems with this kind of thing before she started working there, and the problem stopped as soon as she left the building. There's no doubt it was her. My friend was dating her at the time, and he was livid at first, but then he figured out that he had been bamboozled by her beauty, and she was really that stupid and deceptive. Story 35. I had, for about 3 weeks before I quit, a summer job in high school doing landscaping. The owner of the landscaping company was a local firefighter, 24 hours on, 48 hours off, giving him time 2 days out of 3 to manage his business. He had another firefighter from a different shift manage the day he himself was working at the firehouse. One day we're building a planter box out of old railroad ties stacked about 4 high. To ensure they didn't shift and tumble down over time from the pressure of the contained dirt, we had to drill a couple holes through each one, lined up of course, and then sank a long piece of rebar through all of it into the dirt. Fine. We laid the first layer, drilled holes, sank the rebar, leaving the appropriate amount of rebar above ground. Here comes the WTF. The supervisor had 2 of us hold up the next tie above the rebar to line it up, and he put his finger on the spot on the tie while we carefully set it back down on the ground. Then he drilled a hole, then we picked it up again so he could mark the place to drill the next hole with his finger again. Work was slow, and sometimes his mark was off a bit. The supervisor had to leave early, and I had the audacity as a 17-year-old to say to the other grunts, "Let's try using a ruler." We measured the space between the rebar, drilled holes that far apart in the next tie, and dropped it on. We finished the work quickly. The next day I mentioned our improved technique to the supervisor. "That works," was his reply. Story 36. I worked with someone who ate at the workspace we shared before I came in every day. When I complained about her mess and she got called out on it, she started leaving sticky notes in the middle of her crumbs telling me I might want to clean the desk because she ate there. Story 37. The git was cutting a cardboard box with a knife. The box was slack, so some spots were harder to cut. He was pulling like crazy with the knife directly aimed at his belly button. I told him to never use a knife with the blade facing him. He just replied, "Never happened to me. Why should I care?" Story 38. Right out of college, I worked for a staffing company. I worked on the managed services side, so we would constantly work with Fortune 500 companies to assess the divisions that were having issues and point out the flaws they were experiencing in staffing needs. One major telecom company had an entire division outsourced for design. And as we were exposed to their books, they used a blended rate. Everyone was billing at $140 per hour. At the beginning, this made sense. They had a 1/3 split between junior, mid, and senior levels. Over the 2 years, the company was gouging them by going almost 80% junior and getting a crazy high profit margin. BTW, deliverables from this division, were so bad because they were junior. Once we hit them with our proposal, they decided to go with us, but the transition hadn't been made public. We then passed this to our recruiting team to begin to work with and staff for the new structure. Approximately 160 positions, $30 million contract. I sit down and discuss with the entire team company. ABC does not know about this for another month. Until then, we will not disclose the client or even the industry, okay? I crap you not, the first day someone sends out an email blast to everyone. Telecom company name is currently seeker designers for their location offices as part of a new division that is restructuring in the body. They are getting rid of company ABC, and you can be the next iteration of new age designers. Literally almost cost us $30 million. I told the company either I walk or they transfer him where he can't even see the work I'm doing. I cannot even fathom how bad the stock would have dropped had they kept him on board. They actually just fired him. Story 39. Gomez. It was always ducking Gomez. The most annoying and useless coworker I've ever encountered. Gomez was the type of idiot that would open a can of tuna for his lunch and drain the liquid into the waste paper bin when it was over 30 degrees Celsius inside the crib room. He honestly couldn't see why people got mad. Gomez would spend hours on the phone, loudly arguing, in Spanish, with his Argentinian girlfriend, at work, on work time, international call, in front of everyone who was actually working. Again, he saw no problem when questioned. Gomez was so annoying and intolerable, he got his own project, a project that everyone except him knew would never be taken seriously. Management just wanted him away from everyone. We all did. For some reason, he never got fired. Probably had backing from wealthy family. Gomez came to work one day in a very big huff because he had just been heavily fined and risked losing his license by the police. Why? He had driven through a fenced-off area of roadworks at very high speed. When he ran out of road, he simply drove on the shoulder until they caught him. He genuinely wondered what he'd done wrong. Gomez became so insufferable, management moved him off the entire continent. That's right. They placed him offshore of Australia on a small island, just to keep him away. It wasn't long before the reports from his new post came through. He immediately angered the local owners of the island and risked being sent away. He failed his driving test multiple times. And then, so the story goes, he asked where the ore stockpile was that he'd been sent to survey and take care of. He'd literally been driving around its perimeter for a whole month. Story 40, he came to work with no pants on. When questioned about it, he just said he forgot to put them on. Management went and got him free pants off the shelf and let him work. I work at Walmart. Story 41. Back in college, I went to school with a pretty smart kid. He passed the course with top marks, the best in the year, in fact. Flash forward 10 years. I was working in a call center at the time, in the IT department, and we were in desperate need of another employee. Facebook was a new thing back then, and my smart college friend added me. I asked him if he needed a job to start ASAP. He agreed and came in for an interview and got the job. It was my birthday. We all went out for some drinks and asked my new colleague's smart college friend to come along and meet the team. We sat there drinking, having a laugh. He orders ice cream. Then he starts smothering it on his face and laughing. We all thought he was just drunk and acting weird, so we played along and laughed it off. He starts working with us the following week and sits with me to learn the ropes of the role. He suddenly starts playing with the light switches for the entire room and switches them on and off, on and off. And then again, we are all dumbfounded to what he's doing, but carry on as normal. Lunchtime arrives. We are all sitting in the canteen, eating, and a girl walks in. She sits in the vicinity of my smart college friend. And my friend goes, "I will follow you tonight after work to your house." And just like that, he got called in by the boss and fired, all in a span of 4 hours. I felt so stupid for asking him to come join us. Till this day, I never knew what happened to him. Story 42. Coworker seriously hurt herself, and let me tell you how. We scanned documents, that's what the company did, and at this stage in time, we were doing it for a hospital, so they could move to a totally digital system. So this involved us taking tens, if not hundreds of thousands of personal files that dated back to like the 1920s. That was the earliest file I saw. Sorting out the shorty paper into a scannable format using barcodes, and slamming these huge stacks of paper through a scanner that cost as much as a new low-end Beamer. They came to us in filing boxes. We had a huge warehouse of them, and each one was packed with paper folders, which was pretty ducking heavy. We had pretty stringent policies on manual handling, as we had groups of people who had to take every piece of paper and stack them neatly and sort out bad edges so the scanner didn't maul them. Coworker was one of these people. We kept all the boxes stacked in the prepping area fairly nearly, and they were to be no higher than 4 boxes high. One day, I think she had been working there for around 5 years at this stage. She decided gravity doesn't exist anymore. The fool decides to walk over to a stack of boxes and attempt to remove the bottom box without moving the ones off top. We're talking Jenga pull out, not lift them all. As expected, all the boxes fall down, on top of her head. She was out of work for around 9 months with various injuries caused by her lack of faith in physics. Story 43. I work for a small sporting goods distributor. It's in a small town, so getting quality candidates is probably challenging. They brought in a manager for my region, and they had to settle because the position was open for about a year. And boy, did they settle. He probably interviewed well and had a good resume because his wife was mid-level management at Berkshire Hathaway, which he constantly reminded us about. It was so obvious he was coming in and trying to reuse the techniques his wife taught him that she learned at Berkshire. From day one, he was a disaster. He sent emails with horrible grammar and spelling. During meetings, he would repeat what other people said and add his horrible twist or just kind of say the same thing in his own broken English. He butchered the English language. He commonly said things like interreact for interact, counterreact for counteract, and incentivize for to provide incentive. Something else that cannot be left out is he crap, like explosive bowel movements, a minimum of twice a day. We nicknamed him Diarrhea Dan. Finally, after working for our company nearly a year and a half, we were sitting in a meeting with a retailer, and it was just painfully obvious that he knew nothing. The retailer was discussing building a 300-block rifle, and Dan had no idea what 300 block was and made a completely irrelevant comparison to some other gun. He was fired about 2 months later, and oddly enough, got hired by an R manufacturer. That manufacturer is no longer operating. Story 44. Oh hell, I even have a picture. We have this one lady that is so dumb. We joke that she probably uses her GPS to get to work every morning. We still use filing cabinets for all of our customer folders, and since there are well over 80,000 folders, we don't have a single filing cabinet drawer for each letter, so the letters are broken up. This lady thought the labels were incorrect, so she switched 2 labels and marked out half, then rewrote the original label, but left the second half so it screwed everything up. When we called her out on it, she denied it, then tried to fix it by rewriting the original labels, but still not fixing the second half. We had to completely remake the labels and check the folders in the drawer story. 45. I worked with a girl who was entitled and dumb, so we used to mess with her. Once I told her we were out of paper and asked her to call up Office Max TM and have them fax us over 100 blank sheets and charge it to our account. Then we watched as she tried for a few minutes to convince the worker to fax us paper. Pretty sure she thinks the only reason it didn't work is because the guy wouldn't charge it to our account. Story 46. Work in the oil and gas industry, Canada. Foreman of an instrumentation construction crew. Get this guy added to my crew. I think the guy knew maybe 10 words of English. No translator. All the makings of a bad time. Watch the guy burn a hole in his jacket from his own stream of sparks and dump a liter of cutting oil down the sleeve of his jacket from holding the chuck of a pipe threader while the threader was running. The straw that unfortunately broke his camel's back was that I put him on a job with a welder and another guy from our crew. Working on a structured platform about 15 feet from the ground. Job wraps up, no issues. Welder and the other guy gets down off the platform and is waiting for the tools and materials to be lowered down to them. All of a sudden, a sizable portion of fire blanket comes landing right beside them. Our dude starts throwing crap over the side of this platform. Both the welder and my guy start screaming up to him, saying, "The rope, the rope!" which you are supposed to use to lower the gear down. Our guy takes a hard look at the rope, unties it, and throws that over the side of the railing too. Unfortunately, this was our man's last day on the job site. Oh, and it is worth mentioning that all these events happened within 3 days of one another. Story 47. I worked at a small collection agency. They hired an HR person, and she was interesting. On Veterans Day, she made a poster to celebrate the employees that were former military. It said something like, "We honor and salute you." I emailed her and let her know the poster had honor, misspelled as honor. She went on about how she has a college education, and I don't, and how dare I, blah, blah, blah. Now, the email I sent her was to actually help her, so she wouldn't be embarrassed. But she was a haughty. I am better than you caring about it. So I sarcastically conceded and agreed that my lack of college degree proves I'm wrong. About 10 minutes later, she fixed the misspelling after several of our veterans pointed out her mistake. Story 48. I worked at a university where professors called campus police more than once to report suspicious white powder next to chalkboards. In an athletic building, the pool pump room is also the high voltage room for the building. Installed geothermal HVAC in one building, causing the electrical bill to massively jump. So they installed it in all the building, massively increasing electrical usage and cost. Said they were going green. At night in the summer, they turned off the AC to save money, then ran it to cool the building back down in the morning during peak electrical rate times. They kept promoting their office friends to positions well beyond their abilities, then hired multiple assistants to do their jobs for them, sometimes 4 or 5 people, doing the job of one person, moved air conditioning units to the top of buildings with black roofs for aesthetics. Once, when trees grew around pole lights and blocked the light, they decided the problem was that the poles were too short. They installed bigger steel poles to replace the smaller aluminum ones. Then they were informed that the pole bases were not intended for the greater weight, so they uninstalled the lights, put in sturdier bases, and reinstalled the lights. Still dim. Only then did they finally understand and trim the trees. I could go on for hours. All the dumbest people I knew at work had PhDs. Story 49. Rob. Rob wasn't very bright, like one of our coworkers suggested toothpaste and ketchup make great masturbatory lubricants, and he came to work the next day and told us about his experience. He also showed him how to give himself a BJ, and he injured himself. Additionally, one time he got a tiny bit of nitric acid on his smock, so he stripped down completely naked and was taking a shower in the emergency shower. My then female supervisor happened to be walking by and noticed him, huge saucer eyes, was hilarious, and asked me why Rob was naked taking a shower, and asked that I go check it out. Yeah, probably one of the dumbest non-disabled people I have ever met. Story 50. 2 guys. I worked with Ray as a busboy at a local chain. Ray was caught several times eating leftover food from plates he was bussing. Write-up number 1. I was trying to work my way up to the kitchen, so I was helping out one day, and someone dropped a few orange slices on the floor. Ray promptly picked them up and ate them in front of the shift manager. When asked why the duck he would do that, he replied, "'Cause God made dirt and dirt don't hurt." Fired on the spot. Number 2 happens to have the exact same name as the Parkland shooter. We were constantly covering extra time for each other, but he was still claiming time that I had worked for him. He was constantly asking others to cover him so he could leave work early to see his GF, who was an escort. The boss caught it a few times and he just excused it as a mistake. Then I got called on the carpet for it, since he claimed time that I actually worked. Boss wanted to know why I was claiming extra time, but since number 2 was there too, I just said, "You want to take this one?" Awkward silence. I had a witness to the day that I worked, but he did not. Boss told him if it happened again, there would be consequences. And it did. Just a few weeks later. Story 51. Guy I worked with at Little Caesars. He would says things I would call Thomasism. One lovely such encounter was him telling our boss how his cousin got arrested over the weekend. Boss asks, "Has he had any priors?" Comma guy says, "No, this is his first prior." Sometime later he says, "See, us shift managers are like the anchor to the ship. What happens to a ship without an anchor? Ship sinks." Story 52. Not sure it's fair to call him a coworker, as he didn't really do any work, but this guy takes the cake for dumb. He was a hotshot software engineer, supposedly interviewed really well, and we outbid a few big names to get him. Starts on Monday, by end of day, he's got the environment all set up and a copy of our codebase checked out. Spends all day Tuesday ranting about how stupid all the rest of us are and how crafty the code is and how much there is to fix. Wednesday, more of the same. A bit before lunch, a recruiter calls the boss and asks if we are still looking for great engineers, because he just got a resume for someone that looked perfect for us. Boss says, "Sure, send it over." 5 minutes later, he's calling the recruiter back, asking precisely when that resume came in. Submitted midday yesterday. Okay, yeah. Thanks, we'll pass. Hangs up phone, walks across office, and fires the new guy on the spot, walks him out of the office. Yeah, it was his resume. He had sent it to another recruiter from our office on his second day, while in the middle of a tirade about how bad we were. Story 53, an old boss at an entry-level bank job. She didn't know how to add and subtract if negative numbers were involved. She told me that you can't do math with negative numbers, so if you see a negative, you just treat it like a positive. For example, -5 + 3 = 8. I sat her down and tried to explain it. How would to a 5-year-old? She still argued. So I showed her on a calculator. She said the calculator was wrong because calculators can't compute negatives. I tried the same with Excel and she still didn't believe me. I gave up. The next morning she came in yelling, I got it. Did you know you can add and subtract negative numbers? I guess she went home that night and complained to her kids how dumb I was, and they had to correct her. Another time, she had to find a piece of information in a 600-page PDF. She didn't know you could just do a word search, so she read the entire thing. She accused me more than once of intentionally thinking up complicated scenarios to be a smartass and try to embarrass her. No, you're just that ducking stupid. Although I did start to use big words just to duck with her. Story 54. I had a coworker once who came into work really upset one night. I asked her what was wrong, and she said someone had stolen her identity. I expressed sympathy for her and asked if she knew how it had happened. I had no idea if she had lost her card, or there was some sort of data leakage. So she tells me she's home alone one night when the phone rings. It was an employee from Windows, and he said that there was something wrong with her computer and he can help her fix it. He just needed some information to get into her account. So she gave it to him. I never thought anyone could actually fall for that scam. Story 55. Company was undergoing a merger, and we had this guy come in from the other company who loved to travel to California to see his wife. He would go to client sites unprompted and without purpose, and got away with it because our new overlords were the Colonel Clinks of the chemical world. They have money, but no idea how, and all the brilliant people have died a long time ago. I got a call from one of my favorite clients, a major oil company. This guy brought his wife with him to an active oil field and tried to pass her off as a company employee. When the major oil company got pissed, he put her to sit in the car in an active oil field. Company was pissed and just threw the guy off site. This is a problem because his wife never signed any confidentiality agreements, nor was trained in case of an emergency, which can happen in these fields. I complained to the boss and to the owner. They didn't think this was a big deal. My coworker visited this site like 3 more times. Except he never even went on site and just went on vacation. And that is when I realized my boss is a ducking idiot. Story 56. She wasn't dumb by any means, just incredibly naive. I was training her to be a server at a sit-down fast food joint. My shoe came untied and I pretended to be upset. She asked why, and I told her I couldn't find Velcro shoes that were non-slip. She then tied my shoes. I always ducked with people as much as I could get away with, but she was genuinely trying to help. She eventually worked her ass off, and she would duck with me as often as possible, so I guess it worked out well. The dumbest person I worked with at that job was the one that quit her job while homeless because her unemployed boyfriend wouldn't let his pregnant girlfriend work in a place where he couldn't watch her the entire shift. Management banned him because he would spend 8-hour shifts watching her and yelling at her if she talked to male customers or employees. Story 57. I used to work for a passenger railroad that took people to a very well-known tourist destination. The railroad would run a whole bunch of Christmas trains from November through the first week of January, and they'd hire a bunch of seasonal employees to work as car attendants for the massive influx of families we'd have coming in from all over the country. I was working as a brakeman one night and didn't have every car in my section of the train occupied. I think it was only 3 out of 5 cars had passengers. Anyhow, I still had to walk through all 5 of my cars and do my safety checks and found 2 of these seasonal train attendants porking it in a seat in the first empty car. I had just walked from a car filled with families with young children to this. On top of that, the doors on the ends of the cars had large windows, large enough that I could see a car attendant flashing a light at me, a "we need some help" signal, from one end to the other. The frisky couple couldn't understand why this was a bad idea and why I reported it to their supervisor. Story 58. Was turning some inspections into the admin who was reading numbers off of an open Excel spreadsheet and adding them on a calculator to get the sum to put into a cell on the same spreadsheet. Jaw hit the floor and I walked away in shock. Story 59. I used to work in a retail store and seen a huge influx in sales around tax time. My assistant was always bitter and made comments to people he knew about how it must be nice to have extra money, which more times than not led to them asking about him getting a refund. Very low income city with lots of kids. My assistant didn't have kids, but often tried to play it off he made too much money to get anything back. The really story was, he had went to a major university across state for 2 semesters and flunked out and had his taxes taken to repay part of the debit. Here's where it gets dumb. Because he knew it would take several years of doing this to pay back the debit, he changed his W-4 to 9, or exempt, and would say, "I'm going to get mine before they got theirs." I stopped working with him a while back and have no idea if it ever caught back up with him. Story 60. Worked at a pancake restaurant and had become quick friends with the food runner. The 2 of us would get together and smoke substances after our shifts. One day, he mentioned to me that he gets some decent mids from one of the other servers that works with us. And I wanted someone to make brownies, so my friend told me to go to the server and ask how much he charges. I was no rookie to the substances etiquette, so I know for a fact that I did not make it obvious or do anything out of line. I catch him when he's by himself in the back room rolling silverware and ask him how much he charges for an ounce. First words out of his mouth, "You a cop?" I was stunned at the stupidity of this question. Am I a cop? Yes, you caught me. You have blown my cover. I'm actually old pancake server who has been working at this crafty restaurant for 5 months, just so the local police department can bust you for selling $90 bags of substances. Some people really overestimate their importance. What's your story about an incompetent coworker? Story 1. Guy I worked with at a bar claimed to have loads of experience despite being only 18 in the UK. I worked at kind of an old man pub, so the 2 main drinks were good beer and good scotch. His first customer was one of our regulars and asked for his usual scotch and water. This git served him a single shot, 25 milliliters, of scotch in a tall glass filled to the brim with water and ice. I'm talking like 5 times more water than scotch. Regular took one look at it, turned to me and said, "I'll have my usual," and never spoke to the other kid again. Story 2. I was working it in a hospital a couple years back. This is a true story of what happened there. I went to one of the offices because we had gotten a call about a computer not turning on. We would get them all the time, so this wasn't unusual. 95% of those calls were user error, to put it nicely, so already I was expecting bad, but not this bad. I get there and she's correct. The computer will not turn on at all. I first check the plug. It's in the wall. Looks fine in the back of the computer. So I ask, "What were you doing at the time this computer stopped working?" To which she responded with, "Well, I was using the water cooling feature because I thought it was too hot." Now, as a little bit of exposition, this model of computer had a fan port on the top of the machine that somewhat resembled a funnel. When she said water-cooled, she pointed to this fan port. None of the computers here are even water-cooled. When I walked back to my desk with the now sloshing computer, my fellows in the AT department were perplexed why I pulled to the machine without approval, until I poured out the water into a trash can. T.L. Dr. Someone who works with saving lives didn't understand that water plus computer equals terrible idea. Story 3. Not that this will probably be seen at this point, but oh well. At my former job, they hired a girl who was friends with the CFO's wife. That was seriously the extent of her qualification. We'll call her Twit Karen, because that's what I nicknamed her. She was one of those idiots who is incapable of following a group conversation and will either jump in with random questions that have nothing to do with anything, or will start asking such personal, invasive questions that you just want to squish her like a bug. They hired her to cover maternity leave for one girl who fortunately didn't do a whole lot anyway, so nobody noticed her severe lapses in intellect. Accounting loved her because she would scan old documents to .pdf and get them caught up with their electronic filing. When my maternity leave came around, I suggested getting a temp because I was dealing with complex stuff. My boss said, "Why don't we just have Twit Karen cover for you?" I expressed severe reluctance because I knew her skills weren't up to mine, but he'd made his decision, so I just said, "Okay, I'll train her." I spent the next 3 weeks mentally mapping out every task she was going to have to do, creating training documents that spelled out every step in detail and giving her enough information to cover 90% of what I did on a daily basis. The remaining 10% was the random crap that would come up that I assumed she could figure out for herself. I spent Monday through Wednesday of 2 separate weeks training her, first by demonstration of what I do, then the next week having her do it on her own so that I could correct her. Aside from one utterly egocentric moment where she accused me of not being nice and not wanting to train her, despite spending several hours going over every ducking detail. It seemed to go, okay. I told her several times that if she had questions to call me on my cell phone because I'd rather have her bugging me 10 times a day, even with a new baby, than not hear from her at all and have her guess her way through. Fast forward 9 weeks and I come back to the following. Everything on my desk has been utterly rearranged. I spent 2 hours just trying to find all my crap again. Since when she left, she didn't bother to put anything back. Kind of like she was house sitting, rearranged the furniture, and then left it that way. Logs that I kept as my only documentation on certain things were left blank, so when several people asked me, "Did I send you this?" I couldn't answer and had to go running around to find the information that should have been right at my fingertips. An agency we worked with had sent back a stack of paperwork as incomplete. The form letter sent along with it gave explicit, exact instructions on what needed to be done. But since she couldn't comprehend normal English, she ignored one stack of paperwork and had actually filed another stack. When I asked her what it was, she said, "Oh, I didn't know what to do with that," because she didn't read the oh-so-clear-as-day instructions. While I was out, she had scheduled flights for our sales force to come in for regional training. Instead of confirming itineraries with everyone, she just went ahead and booked the flights. She had one guy, who lives in Fort Lauderdale, flying out of Miami and then home to Tampa. That kind of schedule is impossible to do unless you set it up on purpose. Other people were sent on ridiculous times and had 2 layovers when direct flights were available and within budget. I think we lost a good $3,000 in flights because of her. The woman is incapable of structuring emails with A, good grammar, B, correct spelling, C, punctuation, and D, proper paragraph formatting. Emails actually went outside the company like that. Any emails that did come to her after I came back were just forwarded to me with no explanation. Nothing replying back to the person that Kat is back from maternity leave. So she's taking over everything again, and then copying me on the email so that I could answer their issue. Just an electronically rude shoving aside of information. When she did have questions, instead of calling me like I told her to, she would email my work address. You know, the one I wasn't checking because I wasn't at work? I had ordered a Christmas present for my boss that was delivered to the office. It had actually come addressed to me. Company screwed up. But she never told me. It sat there for weeks until I got back, rather than her picking up the phone and saying, "By the way, this showed up for you. There's more, but I've blocked it out by now." I spent the next 2 months cleaning up all her messes. But because she's bouncy and perky, and has also been incredibly offensive at times, but people laugh it off, they keep her. Story 4. This just happened last week. It's complicated and lacks the universal appeal many of these stories have, but I'm furious about it and need to vent. The publication where I work just put out an advertising-heavy special edition. Since we had to do our normal publication on top of this, and since the boss keeps trying to cut hours and avoid overtime, he chose to hire an outside production freelancer to lay out the special section. We sent the freelancer placeholder copy, lorem ipsum, and ads, so he could mock up the layout. As approved ads and final copy came in, we'd send him the finished replacements to flow into the designated spaces. The freelancer worked at home, but our boss kept in contact with him and assured us everything was going fine in the special section. So print day rolls around, and suddenly nobody can contact the freelancer. He's not responding to emails or answering his phone. The boss says everything's fine, that he's seen the section and it's perfect. Now it's 2 hours past our print deadline, and my boss comes in, tosses us a DVD with a wink and says, "See? I told you everything would work out just fine." The freelancer had dropped by and delivered our section, picked up his check, and left. Well, we'll be a little late to the printer, but at least we have our section. We'll do some rapid corrections in InDesign and send it out ASAP. Let's see what's on the DVD. Flattened, uneditable PDFs and essentially pictures of each page of the special section. And each page is a disaster. The boss had sent the freelancer uncorrected copy to use as placeholder text, and that's what was in the PDFs, complete with typos and notes to the editor, like Daniel DeFresne, check spelling. One article was still completely in lorem ipsum. Large sections of each page were left blank. The paper was full of outdated and expired placeholder ads. Full-page color ads for serious ducking advertisers, like, Microsoft, consisted of a blank white page with Add Microsoft written in the middle. We turned to the boss in amazement. This is a disaster. We can't run this. We'll need to somehow create an entire new special section in the next 30 minutes, or else That's when my boss says he told the freelancer to send the files directly to the printer. It's now 4 a.m. It's too late to stop printing, and pulling the special section means we'd have to pull the normal publication as well. So the special edition hit the streets in shamefully amateur disaster nightmare form. And we had to void $15,000 worth of advertising contracts. And that's why I've already gone through 3 bottles of Jameson this week. Story 5. This time I'm going to tell you about my own incompetence. I worked at a busy publishing company. The boss lady, owner, was a total shrew to anybody showing even a tiny bit of incompetence. Nice enough most of the time though. Just don't screw up in front of her. One day, our Xerox machine broke down. She also owned another unrelated company downstairs. So she asked me to run downstairs and use that Xerox machine until repairs are made. This was on a weekend, so nobody was working downstairs. She dangles the keys to the door in front of me and starts acting like she's talking to a child, explaining how to unlock the door and locate and disable the alarm. Put the key in the lock and turn it, walk through the door, and on your left-hand side is another door. That's where you'll find the alarm. I said, "I'm not a child. I think I know how doors work." So I opened the door and turned to my left to open the other door and find the alarm, which started beeping when I opened the first door. I looked to my left and the door there is the ladies' bathroom. I thought, this is odd, an alarm in the women's room? So I walk inside and of course there's no alarm there. Meanwhile, the beeps are progressively getting more urgent. I figure maybe she meant my other left. Back into the hallway, I open the door on the opposite side. It looks nice, big meeting room, but no alarm to be found, and the beeps are getting faster and louder. There are 4 other doors down the hallway, so thinking she's an idiot, I ran down to the end doors and explore those rooms for the alarm. Can't find it. Turns out the alarm was in the second door on the right, a sort of storage janitor's closet. But by this time, the alarm has gone off. Blar! So I go back to boss lady with my tail between my knees and the keys in my hand and apologize for not finding the alarm quickly enough. She gets on the phone and calls the alarm company and police to let them know it was a false alarm. Back down I go to do my Xeroxing. While I'm standing there, thinking about what an idiot I am, I hear the front door burst violently open. Made me jump! There were 2 cops standing there with guns pointed at me. "Freeze! Stay right where you are, scumbag!" I put my hands in the air and said sheepishly, I work here. Well, not here, but upstairs. My boss lady owns this. Other cop goes, "I think he's getting squirrely with you, Bruce. Get squirrely with me, boy, and I'll put a bullet right between your ducking eyes. Let's see some proof that you work here, punk." Okay, let me get my wallet out of my back pocket. Slowly. But then I remember that I have my business cards for the publishing company upstairs, but nothing that says I work at this company. On second thought, I said and started walking towards the doorway, let me just yell upstairs for my boss lady. She can Both cops went into shooting stance and cocked both their guns. I said, "Freeze, scumbag." Okay, better idea. How about I just call her on the phone here? They let me call her. She came down and explained the matter to the cops, and they left me there in my shame to continue Xeroxing. By the time I'd finished, most everybody in the publishing office had gone home, including the boss lady. Only my secretary was there, finishing up her typesetting duties. I breathed a sigh of relief that the boss lady had gone home. Me and my secretary sat down and had a little laugh about my adventure. I lit a cigarette, yeah, we could smoke in the office back then, and walked over to see a sign the boss lady had hastily slapped on the wall that read, "If anybody sets off the alarms, it costs this company $200 for every false alarm. This will be deducted from your pay." Something like that. As I read the sign, I took a deep hit on my cigarette and exhaled deeply towards the sign. The sign that she thoughtfully posted directly below the smoke detector. Bahaway! My smoke set the damn thing off. I just hung my head and proceeded to call boss lady at home and tell her I accidentally set the alarm off again. It was not my best day at work. It's me. I'm that guy. Story 6. This made me remember some of the most hilarious things a coworker believed when I was working in a fast food burger store. She believed chicken fillet took longer to cook than beef patties because we have to flip it 3 times instead of twice. We told her it's because chicken fillets are triangular and therefore has 3 sides, and since then, she's been telling the customers that. She once believed that there was a goldfish in the fryer, and we had to fish it out. We threw in a ball of bread and it started bubbling underneath, so we jokingly told her that a goldfish fell in. She came back to check on it several times to see if we've saved it yet. Not sure if this one counts as dumb or just weird. She had a gravy diet. She believed gravy was a great way to make her feel full so she wouldn't eat so much. No matter what we told her, she kept drinking gravy in cups and cups without eating lunch. Just remembered that once she also took about 6 large expired milk cartons home to bathe in for good skin, which may be completely fine if she hadn't forgotten to use it and 6 cartons of milk curdled in her house. Story 7. One of the professors supported by my office needed to purchase a download of Photoshop from the Adobe website. So I went to our receptionist, a woman in her 60s who has difficulty with newfangled computers. I don't ever mind helping her, since it's my job, but she couples it up with getting very defensive. She resents her own misunderstanding and takes it out on me when we try to fix a problem. Anyway, she's the only one in the office who has a university credit card, which we needed for purchasing a Photoshop license. So the conversation went as follows, more or less word for word. Me, John needs a license to download Photoshop. Could you please go to Adobe's website and I'll show you exactly what he needs. Her, I spoke with John. He doesn't want Adobe, he wants Photoshop. Me, all right, Adobe Photoshop. Her, yes, not Adobe. Photoshop, he needs Photoshop. Which, right, could you please go to adobe.com and I'll show you. Her, he doesn't need Adobe, he needs Photoshop. My imitation of Fry is not sure of face. Adobe is the name of the company. Photoshop is a particular product they make. I think you're thinking of Reader, which is her. Look, John told me and I'm telling you, he needs Photoshop. Me. Here, I'll show you what I mean. Can I please use your computer? Her. No, you need to teach me, not show me. All right, go to adobe.com. Her. But he doesn't need Adobe, he needs Photoshop. I swear I thought I was being punked. This went on for about 5 minutes before I gave up, went to my desk, went to Adobe's site and the license purchasing page, and emailed it to her. Story 8. Mark. Mark was a pharmacy cashier that I worked with for a couple of years while doing my internship at Walmart. He was a nice guy, but he was also something else. He somehow found a way to completely screw up a pharmacy pickup order. Nobody knows how he did it, since he's not supposed to have computer access. We had a customer that shared the exact same name. My gosh, I hate people with common names. With another person at a different Walmart. Well, Mark somehow found a way to screw up their pharmacy orders and ended up getting the other guy's orders filled at our Walmart and the ones we needed filled at the other Walmart. When he got bored, he would go around the store and always find some sort of item that he could use to get himself in trouble in the pharmacy. Be it bouncy balls, toy cars, etc. Woe be it unto the pharmacy when Halloween came around. All the little props and stuff were right across from us, right in Mark's view. When Mark wasn't getting in trouble with toys, he could be caught reading Archie magazines that he stole from the cash registers up front. We wouldn't care as much if he weren't so annoying. One of the techs actually pulled the Archie comic from him one day and rang it up on the register and told him to pay up for it. He didn't pay up, to which the tech told him to go put it back where he found it then. I once got into a conversation with him about gays. Don't know how I did. He said gay guys can't raise children and that it was wrong. But he thought it was okay for lesbians to do so because they had that motherly nature or something. Being a closeted gay guy, I had to find his argument to be very shallow. One day, he did something bad, can't remember enough, that the pharmacy manager wrote him up. He saw in his profile that he had been written up before. He asked Mark about it, and Mark said he hadn't been written up as far as he knew. The manager said the comments said something about being reckless in the back of the store, to which Mark then chimed in, "Oh, I remember now. They gave me a safety badge and made me a member of the safety team." He never even knew he was being written up or punished. Greater than. Every so often, someone in the pharmacy would buy some sort of snack or candy and share it with the rest of the pharmacy just as a goodwill. Mark never did the same, but I'll be damned if he didn't try his best to eat anything that made its way back into the pharmacy. To get back at him, one of the pharmacists offered him some blackjack gum with the stipulation that he had to chew it for at least a minute before he could spit it out. He was never suspicious despite that, and he gladly accepted the gum only to find out it tasted like licorice. Apparently, he didn't like licorice. Mark was always asking the pharmacy manager to be promoted to tech. Me and two other pharmacy techs both said we'd resign if he ever did such a thing. One time, Mark was attending to the line of customers at the cash register. After finishing up with one lady, Mark went to the back to do who knows what as a black lady who was next in line came up. She complained to the pharmacy manager saying that the Mark was idiot. Personally, I don't know that Mark even knows how to be an idiot. He was just dumb. Story 9. My current boss is a git. I'm really not sure how he made it to a director level. My company typically makes very good hiring decisions. He asked me to prepare a presentation for the whole company to roll out a newly instituted policy. 3 days later, I delivered the presentation to him and he had forgotten about it. He replied to me and CC'd his boss, because he's that dumb, saying, "I don't know who gave you the authority to write your own policies, but nothing leads me to believe that we would embrace this type of policy anytime in the near future. Please consult with me prior to wasting any resources on these types of projects." His boss replied to both of us and said, "Is this some sort of inside joke between you two? Good job, Bohica. We will roll this out immediately." Also, he doesn't use there, and there. In his world, there's only one spelling, there. There are really too many stupid things to mention here. Story 10. Does overcompetence to the point of incompetence count? Was a tour guide in a small town museum, pretty much a really old house, converted into a look how they lived kind of place, about 1700s to early 1900s. It was myself from a nearby small town, two local girls who were in with the bosses, and another guy from my town. It was a sweet, laid-back job where everyone could take it easy, not all the time, but often. Except for the other guy. It's hard to describe. We were all relaxed, normal people enjoying our jobs. It was a lot of fun. But he refused to ever take it down a notch. Everything had to be done exactly right and as quickly as possible. We always had tons of time, but that didn't matter. A tour could last anywhere from 30 minutes to a couple of hours, depending on the group and their interest. If he was told to give a quick tour, he didn't care. It would still last 2 to 3 hours. They'd start to push me towards these quicker groups because I can be brief, but if he got it in his mind, he wanted to give them the tour. They were stuck for 3 hours. This would cause huge bottlenecks on busy days, and no amount of explanation would change his behavior, even from the bosses. In fact, he'd just get pissy that others weren't working as hard as he thought they should, and you couldn't even exploit his eagerness. If you weren't at the same level as him, he wouldn't do anything extra, just caring that you were slow. He was easily the hardest worker there. But everyone, bosses included, was sick of his crap by the end. The only thing that made it bearable was wearing a tricorn hat while condescendingly explaining that he needs to settle the duck down. Story 11. I was supposed to train a new junior at my firm. He showed up at 11:30 a.m., workday starts at 8, on his first day. When he sat down, I asked him what was up. He said, "Am I late?" And I said, "Everyone gets in at 8 o'clock. "Oh, I'm so sorry, but I won't be able to come in earlier than 10, TF. No reason was given. Sadly, I do not have the authority to fire someone, and my boss was out for the day, so I stuck with him. At lunch, he arrives back half an hour late. At 3, he starts packing his bag. I ask where he's going. He said home. I told him that he had to work the full 8 hours. He refused and left. He said no one still works an 8-hour day. I promptly left my boss a voicemail, and when new guy strolled in the next day at 10:30, the boss fired him on the spot. Apparently, this 22-year-old guy has never worked a day in his life. It was shocking. He thought that working less than 3 hours was appropriate. Story 12. 2 people in this office and they're married to each other. The husband, my boss, abuses the comma in just about every email he sends out. If you read commas with a pause after each one, like you should, this guy goes above and beyond Shatner for ridiculous pauses. Quoted from an email he sent me, and before you ask, I had nothing to do at work. Kindly go on the internet to try to find banks that would make a car loan under $10,000 for a car that is a 1994 model year. I work at a technical writing firm. How this crap flies in a writing environment, coupled with the fact that he runs this place, is beyond me. We also do staffing and contract hires on the side for companies, and I help out with that. He and I share the HR email account for the company. I witness him sending out emails with similar comma stutters as the one above to both companies and interested candidates. It's ridiculous. His wife runs her own company, separate from technical writing, in the same building. She is technically incompetent and generally clueless, always complaining about some problem on her MacBook Pro that she claims isn't her fault, but it totally is. And either my coworker or I have to deal with it because she comes to us for help. The time that took the cake was when she came to me asking for help with shipping something from stamps.com. She had some promo credit to use and wanted to burn it on sending this package out. She's telling me that this stamps.com program you had to download used to run on her MacBook, but doesn't now, for some weird reason. Looking at the stamps.com site, the software is Windows only, so she's straight up lying. Telling her this, she sticks to her guns and said it used to work, but now we must use a PC to get this settled. I get on a PC, download the software, and the prompt asks for a user/pass combo. She types it in and claims it's right, only to get the invalid username or password message repeatedly. She can't, for some reason, retrieve the user/pass because apparently she set it up on an old email account, so she resorts to calling stamps.com support to get it, which is absolutely tedious as crap to deal with, apparently. I left her at this point to work on something else, but I'm within earshot of the convo. They ask her, "Have you downloaded the software?" To which she replies, "I don't know if I did," and frantic clicking occurs. I walk over to see what the hell is going on. She's repeatedly opening the .exe installer from the Firefox download window saying, "It's not working." Cue me nearly banging my head through the nearest desk. After passing this giant obstacle, she logs in and asks for my help actually getting the postage prepped. At this point, it's been nearly an hour and a half since she came to me for help. The program asks for the dimensions and weight, so I grab the box from her to measure it. I look at the box, and there's already a ducking prepaid shipping return label on it. Story 13. The guy at my office just sits around on Reddit all day, does the bare minimum of work, and is just coasting until he gets fired. I am the incompetent worker. Story 14. A hole where I used to work. I won't get into too many details, but he was generally a model for the stereotypical angry git from certain country. He spent a great deal of time criticizing anyone younger than him. He must have been 55 or 60, for anything you can imagine. He was always full of crap. He was always claiming people took long lunches, were late, left early, not doing their jobs right, working slow, stealing things, etc. Sometimes he'd walk around and just look for things to complain about. Again, he was always full of crap, sticking his nose where it didn't belong and causing problems and misunderstandings. One time he said I'd stolen an expensive $300 tool, reported it to my boss, who asked me to his office. It was my own tool, and I happened to have the receipt to prove it's still in my car. He claimed I'd been taking long lunches. My boss decided to see if this was the case before acting on it, which led him to discover that I hadn't even taken a lunch during the previous 2 weeks because we were so busy. And before that, I'd stopped even taking our 2 allowed daily 10-minute breaks because I thought it was a waste of time. I wasn't getting paid for any of this either. Another time, the floor manager, top guy besides the owner, asked me to fill in doing some work for a contractor who was not directly an employee of the company. I did it the first day, no problem. Second day, Git comes over and says, "What are you doing?" in the a-hole tone when he's looking to pick a fight. What I'm doing is none of his business. So I told him I was writing the great American novel. Another time, I was working as part of a 3-stage operation. I'd do the first part, Git would do the second part, team leader would do the third part. By the time things reach team leader, they're not usable. Git blames me. This starts an investigation with a few high-level people to determine a way to make sure I can't screw things up. But I don't learn about this until they come to me with their list of new rules. I ask what it's all about, and they explain. I point out that it's physically impossible for me to have caused the damage. Thousands of dollars of materials destroyed, more in the meantime, plus 3 hours each for about 5 people who get $20 plus an hour to have their meeting, during which time a lot of time-sensitive work has piled up for each of them. Everyone wanted him gone, but he'd been with the company for about 15 years, and the owner was pretty insulated from the daily goings-on of the workers on the floor. What finally put him on his way out was when he let loose a long string of shouted expletives right outside the main office door while the owner was having an international conference call with people who in large part kept us in business, which may have played a part in us losing the contract. Story 15, my boss, 2 jobs ago. He, along with his wife, was the company's CEO. He oversaw production and operations type stuff, and his wife oversaw sales, marketing, and customer service. They jointly oversaw R&D, This was a food production company. Anyway, 2007 was a banner year for the company. They picked up SuperValu and later Walmart as customers. They had so much production that they literally could not ship the product out the door as fast as they could make it, so the whole plant would get clogged up with pallets of finished goods, and by midweek it would become impossible to move around. This is not an uncommon problem in the food industry for a building with 2 or 3 dock doors for the loading of trucks. So the logical next step is to find a cold storage warehouse and contract a trucking company to shuttle product constantly all day and night to the warehouse. Nope. This guy decides that his company has hit the big time, and it's time for a mega huge awesome expansion. He goes and leases a huge facility that's 40 minutes away from the current facility. It's literally 4 times the size of the first place. It's also a ducking dump filled with rats and old junk from the previous tenants, another food company. He borrows $1.3 million to overhaul the facility into a bakery, dry storage warehouse, and cold storage warehouse. The only problem is that the current need only justified renovation of something like 50% of the square footage. All of a sudden, we had a building that was half ultra-modern and nice and half a dump. Oh, did I mention that this was leased space? He dumped $1.3 million into renovating a building he did not even own and signed a 3-year lease. On top of that, he bought a fleet of trucks instead of hiring an outside company to move our goods. All of a sudden, we had all the space and capacity we needed, and our overhead had increased by several 100%, but our original plant was still running at 85% capacity. If the company had managed to add another nationwide chain as a customer, we literally could not have accommodated the production need without putting another $1 million into the other plant we had leased. So the company started losing massive amounts of money in 2009. In early 2010, one of our biggest customers pulled out, representing 60% of our total sales and 90% of the total production at the new facility. The company hemorrhaged money in 2010. I jumped ship almost immediately and eventually went bankrupt.